Beneath the scorching sands of the Middle East lie cities no map remembers, temples older than the pyramids, scripts no one can read, and they're not alone. From Turkey to Iran, from Syria to Arabia, more of these sites are surfacing, each stranger than the last. Monuments so ancient, they predate the wheel, and possibly even the idea of civilization itself. For generations, archaeologists believed civilization began with farming. People settled down to survive, and everything else, writing, religion, cities, came later. But now, ruins are emerging that don't quite fit that story. Massive, symbolic, and impossibly old, they raise questions no one expected to ask. From the stone circles of Turkey to forgotten cities in Syria, Iran, and Arabia, a hidden world is coming back into view, one scattered across deserts, floodplains, and war-torn valleys. And before this video ends, we'll reveal a discovery so strange, so out of place in time, it may change how we understand the very roots of civilization. You're watching Armchair Archaeology, where history isn't just unearthed, it's rewritten. Before we step into the oldest known temples on Earth, take a moment to subscribe. Here at Armchair Archaeology, we follow the questions that echo across millennia, and your curiosity fuels the journey. In the arid hills of southeastern Turkey, buried beneath layers of soil and time, stands one of the most puzzling archaeological sites ever discovered. Göbekli Tepe. First excavated in the 1990s, it dates back to around 9600 BCE, making it more than 7,000 years older than the pyramids of Egypt. What archaeologists uncovered there didn't fit any known pattern. Massive T-shaped stone pillars, some over 16 feet tall and weighing up to 20 tons, were arranged in circular enclosures. Each is carved with animals, foxes, vultures, snakes, scorpions, rendered in fine relief. The carvings suggest symbolism, memory, maybe even mythology. These weren't just decorations, they meant something. But what exactly did they mean? We may never fully know, but the effort speaks volumes. The people who built this place were not farmers. They left no signs of crops, pottery, or permanent homes. They were hunter-gatherers, arriving in seasonal waves, bringing tools and labor from across the surrounding hills. There's no evidence of domestic life, no hearths, no fields, no burial grounds. It wasn't a settlement. It was something else entirely. Over generations, they carved and raised these stones without metal, wheels, or draft animals. Whatever purpose Göbekli Tepe served, it must have mattered deeply. It required not just effort, but shared vision. Modern researchers have begun to see it less as a village and more like a kind of pilgrimage site, a sacred place people return to long before cities or states. In that sense, it's been compared to a cathedral without a congregation, standing alone at the dawn of memory. And it isn't alone. Nearby sites like Karahan Tepe and Nevali Chori are now revealing similar patterns: stones, enclosures, carvings, hidden in the same ancient soil. Before cities, before kings, before writing, we gathered here to carve, to build, to remember. And if you're finding yourself drawn deeper into these ancient mysteries, there's more waiting. Our companion ebook, Secrets of the Ancient World, uncovers enigmatic sites like Karahan Tepe and Ganj Dareh in even more detail, plus a few you've likely never heard of. The link's waiting in the pinned comment. While the stone enclosures of Göbekli Tepe rose from open hillsides, a quieter transformation was unfolding to the east, in the Zagros Mountains, where some of the world's first villages began to take shape. Sites like Ganj Dareh, Tepe Guran, and Ali Kosh, dating to around 8000 BCE, offer a glimpse of life on the edge of permanence. Here, communities built mud brick houses, used early ceramics, and began domesticating animals, especially goats. These were still small-scale settlements, but they reveal a world slowly shifting from mobile bands to rooted households. Unlike the monumentality of Göbekli Tepe, these sites speak through subtler things: a grindstone worn smooth by years of use, ash from repeated hearths, the bones of animals bred to stay close. This was not yet full-scale farming, but it was something new, a life tied to place. And what stands out is who may have shaped that life. At Ganj Dareh, burial sites and artifacts suggest women may have played a central role in early community life. Some of the earliest figurines, tools, and personal goods are found in association with female remains. This hints at a possible matrilineal or matrifocal society, a structure very different from what later patriarchal civilizations would establish. These early villagers lived close to the land and to each other. They worked communally, buried their dead beneath their homes, and marked space in ways that were both practical and symbolic. There was evidence of shared courtyards and rooms that may have served ritual purposes, blurred boundaries between daily life and belief. It wasn't religion or ritual as we define it today, but something ancestral, intuitive, a form of meaning embedded in the mundane. The Zagros villages weren't empires or temples. They were something more intimate, the beginning of the home. And long before laws or writing, they posed a timeless question: who belongs here, and who decides? In the flat, fertile plains of southern Iraq, the quiet experiments of early villages gave way to something revolutionary. Here, along the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates, people didn't just settle, they built cities. By the 4th millennium BCE, places like Uruk, Eridu, and Lagash had grown into sprawling urban centers. They featured monumental temples, walls, marketplaces, and central plazas. These weren't just large communities, they were organized societies with layered hierarchies, labor systems, and infrastructure that spanned generations. At the heart of it all were the temple complexes. These weren't just places of worship, they were administrative engines, collecting grain, managing resources, and redistributing labor. Temple staff functioned as early bureaucrats, recording transactions on clay tablets. And from this need to account for goods, something extraordinary emerged: writing. The earliest known written records aren't myths or laws. They're inventories, lists of sheep, rations of beer, tallies of workers. The first writing wasn't poetry, it was accounting. Civilization began not with poetry, but with paperwork. Towering over these cities were ziggurats, stepped platforms built from sun-dried brick. Rising from floodplains, they were both cosmic symbols and civic centers, visible for miles, connecting heaven and earth through their massive scale. Compared to Göbekli Tepe or the Zagros villages, Mesopotamian cities feel like another world, densely populated, resource-intensive, and increasingly hierarchical. But they weren't disconnected. In fact, many of their myths, symbols, and social structures echo those found in older places, just transformed and scaled up. This was the moment human society began to self-replicate. Systems were born: legal, religious, architectural, economic. And with writing, memory was no longer tied to a body or a voice. It could be stored, copied, and passed on indefinitely. As the city-states of Mesopotamia grew in wealth and complexity, so did their rivalries. Competing for land, water, and trade, these urban centers became locked in cycles of conflict, until, in the 24th century BCE, one leader changed everything. Sargon of Akkad rose from obscurity to conquer the region's fragmented cities, founding what is often called the world's first empire. The Akkadian Empire stretched from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea, a staggering political achievement in a time with no roads, no standing armies, and no common language. What held it together wasn't just force, it was administration.
Clay tablets from the era reveal a centralized system of governors, messengers, scribes, and tax collectors. Akkadian rule blended military power with myth and ritual. Sargon was not just a king, he was divinely chosen, a concept reinforced through seals, inscriptions, and temple ceremonies. This is when myth and statecraft fused. The Sumerians had already given us epic literature like the Gilgamesh cycle, rich with gods, monsters, and questions of mortality. Under Akkadian rule, these stories became political tools, shaping how people understood kingship, destiny, and divine order. Meanwhile, the empire's reach was astonishing. Akkadian goods and seals have been found as far as Anatolia, the Levant, and the Indus Valley, evidence of a Bronze Age trade network stretching thousands of miles. Lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, cedar from Lebanon, tin from Iran, all moved through this early web of diplomacy and commerce. But empires are fragile. Within a few generations, Akkad fell to invasions and internal unrest. Yet what survived was the blueprint, a new kind of power that reached beyond the city wall. From this point forward, civilization wasn't just local. It could be scaled, exported, and remembered. Between the great powers of Egypt and Mesopotamia lay the Levant, a narrow strip of land now divided among Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Jordan, and Palestine. Far from being a peripheral zone, this region was once a vibrant corridor of cities, trade, diplomacy, and innovation. One of the earliest to rise was Ebla in northern Syria. In the 1970s, archaeologists uncovered its royal archive, over 17,000 cuneiform tablets. These documents recorded treaties, trade routes, religious texts, and even linguistic hints that still stirred debate. This wasn't just bureaucracy, it was diplomacy encoded in clay, proof of a region alive with negotiation and nuance. Some claim the tablets include early references to biblical names and places. Others caution against reading too far. What's clear is that Ebla was a cosmopolitan court, literate, political, and deeply interconnected. Farther west, along the Mediterranean coast, stood Ugarit. Here, carved into clay, archaeologists found something astonishing: the oldest known written music, a hymn to the goddess Nikal, inscribed around 1400 BCE, complete with lyrics and musical notation. It's been reconstructed and performed, meaning we can now listen to a melody composed over 3,000 years ago. Cities like Hatzor, Byblos, and Megiddo also flourished, acting as cultural brokers between Egypt, Anatolia, and Mesopotamia. The Levant was where scripts evolved, alphabets emerged, and hybrid identities took shape. But by around 1200 BCE, many of these cities fell in the great upheaval known as the Late Bronze Age collapse. Whether through invasion, famine, rebellion, or climate change, entire kingdoms disappeared, leaving behind destruction layers and half-told stories. Today, many of these ancient cities lie beneath modern ones, built over again and again. They remind us that cultural memory isn't linear, it's layered, and that sometimes the foundations of the present sit atop civilizations the world forgot. This patchwork of forgotten kingdoms, from Ebla's archives to the music of Ugarit, barely scratches the surface. In Secrets of the Ancient World, we dig into the lost layers of the Levant and beyond, exploring how music, memory, and myth shaped entire civilizations. You'll find it linked in the pinned comment. Long before the rise of Islam, the Arabian Peninsula was a landscape of meaning. Far from empty, it was etched with memory, carved into cliffs, traded along caravan routes, and buried beneath dunes. Across Saudi Arabia, tens of thousands of petroglyphs stretch across lava fields and canyon walls. Some date back over 8,000 years. They depict hunters on foot, herders driving cattle, and dancers locked in ceremonial gestures. There are also mysterious figures, half human, half animal, suggesting myth or ritual. These images weren't idle art. They were a language of place and presence, a way of making memory permanent in a world without cities. In northwestern Arabia, the sandstone cliffs of Hagra, also known as Madayan Salih, hold another story. Once part of the Nabatean kingdom, this city was carved directly into the rock by the same culture that built Petra. Over 100 monumental tombs survive, blending Greco-Roman, Mesopotamian, and local styles. Inscriptions name the dead, mark property rights, and hint at a vibrant multicultural life. Long avoided out of reverence, Hagra remained untouched for centuries. Only in the last 2 decades has archaeology begun to reveal its scale and its sophistication. Even farther south, ancient travelers spoke of Ubar, a city swallowed by the desert. In the 1990s, satellite images led researchers to a collapsed fortress in Oman, near the old frankincense trade routes. Was it Ubar? Perhaps not, but it was something, and it proves Arabia once thrived on long-distance exchange. This was not a void waiting to be filled. It was a canvas already painted, with myths, markets, and memory. It was a world already rich in belief, trade, and imagination. Its legacy survives not in ruins alone, but in stone carvings, lost cities, and stories that still cling to the dust. Before Persepolis and the Persian Empire, the Iranian plateau was home to civilizations as ancient and as elusive as those of Mesopotamia. In the southwestern lowlands, near today's Khuzestan province, rose the kingdom of Elam. Beginning around 2700 BCE, the Elamites built ziggurats, ruled from fortified cities, and developed a writing system entirely distinct from cuneiform. Their language remains only partially understood. Elam was not a cultural echo of Sumer, it was a rival. At times they traded, at others they clashed. Royal inscriptions, temples, and administrative archives show a civilization with deep roots and an identity of its own. But centuries of conquest by Assyrians, Babylonians, and later Persians reduced Elam's legacy to fragments. Then, in the early 2000s, a discovery in southeastern Iran disrupted the timeline again. Near the Halil River, archaeologists uncovered the ruins of Jiroft, a city filled with elaborately carved chloride vessels, strange geometric symbols, and tablets in unknown scripts. The iconography doesn't match Elam, Mesopotamia, or the Indus Valley. Winged creatures, composite beasts, abstract forms, these objects seem to belong to a civilization missing from the historical record. Looting at the site has complicated interpretation, but some scholars believe Jiroft may be a lost Bronze Age culture, contemporary with Sumer, but culturally distinct. If true, it challenges the notion that civilization flowed outward from a single origin. To the north, the Medes, a confederation of Indo-Iranian tribes, would later rise to challenge Assyria and help lay the foundation for the Persian Empire. But even in their rise, echoes of earlier symbols and stories persisted, suggesting that empires didn't start from scratch. They inherited the sacred. Jiroft, Elam, and the Medes remind us that history isn't a straight line. It's a palimpsest. And sometimes, civilizations vanish so thoroughly they survive only in broken scripts and objects no one can explain. And maybe that's the point. Some histories aren't lost. They're waiting for the right eyes. If it surprised you to learn that some of these civilizations, like Jiroft, barely even made it into the history books, that's the kind of revelation we live for. If you'd like to support more stories like this, consider hitting the Super Thanks button, or just leave a comment. What ancient site left you speechless?
By the 6th century BCE, a new kind of power emerged on the Iranian plateau. Under Cyrus the Great, the Achaemenid Empire became the largest the world had yet seen, stretching from the Indus Valley to the Aegean Sea. It wasn't just vast, it was different. Cyrus conquered with force, yes, but also with policy. He freed enslaved peoples, restored local religions, and allowed deported communities, like the Jews of Babylon, to return home. His tomb at Pasargadae, modest and unadorned, reflected a kingship rooted not in domination, but stewardship.
Some have even called it history's first statement of human dignity. His successors, Darius, Xerxes, expanded and refined this vision. At Persepolis, they built a ceremonial capital unlike any other, a platform of carved stone with symmetrical halls, sweeping staircases, and reliefs depicting delegates from across the empire: Assyrians, Babylonians, Ethiopians, Greeks, all shown bringing tribute, not as prisoners, but as honored participants in a shared order. This wasn't naive multiculturalism. It was imperial messaging: unity through difference, rule through ritual. Achaemenid propaganda carved itself in stone. And yet, that stone would burn. In 330 BCE, Alexander the Great set fire to Persepolis, perhaps in revenge, perhaps in ceremony, perhaps by accident. The flames destroyed the palaces, but paradoxically, they also preserved bas-reliefs beneath layers of ash and rubble, allowing us to see them today in stunning detail. Persepolis was never finished. It remains a monument to ambition cut short, but also a model of empire that prized order, diversity, and symbolic rule. In a world still grappling with empire, identity, and governance, the Achaemenids offer something rare in antiquity: a vision of power that didn't erase difference, but incorporated it. And its echoes still whisper from stone once touched by fire. As the Roman and later Byzantine empires expanded eastward, the Middle East became more than a borderland. It became a crucible, not just a place where empires collided, but where cultures blended, beliefs overlapped, and cities adapted to survive. One of the most revealing sites is Dura Europos, a Roman garrison town on the Euphrates in what is now Syria. Abandoned in the 3rd century CE, its dry climate preserves something extraordinary: a synagogue, richly painted with Old Testament scenes. Just meters away, archaeologists uncovered a Christian house church, one of the earliest ever found. Nearby stood pagan temples. In a single walled city, multiple worldviews coexisted, each painting its vision on shared stone. Farther west, the city of Palmyra flourished as a trade hub connecting Persia, Arabia, and Rome. Its grand colonnades and desert tombs reflected both wealth and independence. In the 3rd century, Queen Zenobia declared herself empress, defying Rome and briefly carving out her own Eastern Empire. Her rebellion failed, but her image endures: warrior, scholar, queen. South of there, Petra, capital of the Nabatean kingdom, was carved directly into rose-colored cliffs. Hidden in a mountain valley, Petra was fortress, part sanctuary, and fully cosmopolitan. Its architecture fuses Hellenistic, Arabian, and Mesopotamian styles, shaped by the rhythms of caravan trade. These weren't isolated outposts. They were intersections, places where ideas moved faster than armies, and where faiths and people shaped one another. Built at crossroads, these cities were born from movement, of goods, ideas, and gods. In many ways, they resemble modern cities, layered, diverse, constantly rebuilding. And in a region often seen only through the lens of conflict, these ancient frontiers remind us of something else: that coexistence too has deep roots. And sometimes, it's the margins that hold the center together. With the rise of Islam in the 7th century CE, the ancient cities of the Middle East entered a new era, one shaped not by the collapse of the past, but its transformation. From Damascus to Baghdad, Samarra to Cairo, new Islamic capitals rose atop the ruins of earlier empires. But they didn't erase what came before. They absorbed it, architecturally, intellectually, spiritually. In Damascus, the Umayyad Mosque was built atop a Roman temple and Christian basilica. Its mosaics still shimmer with influences drawn from Byzantium and Persia. In Baghdad, the Abbasid caliphs envisioned a round city, a cosmological plan rooted in ancient Iranian models. Inside its walls were palaces, gardens, libraries, and schools. Scholars translated Greek, Persian, and Indian text into Arabic, creating a burst of knowledge that would shape science, medicine, and philosophy for centuries. It was a golden age of ideas without borders. Across these cities, early mosques adapted to local materials and traditions. And under modern streets, archaeologists have begun uncovering them. Mosques older than the cities themselves, with different qibla directions, foundation stones, and ritual features that reveal how the religion evolved in dialogue with space and history. Urban life during this period was layered and intentional. What emerged was a city not just designed for living, but to think. Markets were regulated, water systems engineered, streets aligned with celestial events. It was an era of urban design as spiritual expression. Islam didn't replace the ancient world, it reframed it, rooting itself in the same geography, but casting a new light on it. In these cities, belief shaped bricks, memory shaped maps, and across centuries of conquest and change, the idea of the city endured, as a space not just to live, but to learn, question, and belong. We began with a puzzle, a temple older than farming, carved by people with no cities, no wheels, and no written language. At first, Göbekli Tepe seemed like an outlier, a strange monument rising from the deep past, alone on the timeline. But it isn't alone. Across southeastern Turkey, northern Syria, and western Iraq, archaeologists are now uncovering a network of similar sites. Places like Karahan Tepe, Navali Chori, and others still buried beneath soil and war zones. They share design features: circular enclosures, carved pillars, symbolic animal motifs, and no signs of permanent domestic life. Each site whispers the same thing: meaning came before permanence. Together, they reveal a stunning pattern. The world's first temples were built before the world's first farms. This challenges everything we thought we knew. For decades, the dominant model said people settled down to survive, then built religion, cities, and states. But the evidence now suggests that belief came first. People gathered to carve stone, to create ritual spaces, to remember something together. And it was in those gatherings that they began to stay. Farming followed. Villages followed. History followed. This makes the Middle East not just the cradle of civilization, but its first place of collective meaning, where memory, myth, and ritual shape the landscape long before politics or conquest. And much of it is still underground. Some of it lies beneath modern cities, others in active conflict zones. But every season new pieces emerge, reminders that what we call the beginning is still unfolding. Civilization didn't start with tools or territory. It started with people coming together to build, to believe, to belong. And somewhere beneath the dust and stone, they left us the blueprint. Thank you for joining us on this journey through 12,000 years of buried memory, sacred stone, and civilizations lost to time. If you found this exploration of the ancient Middle East thought-provoking, we'd love your support. Give the video a like, subscribe to Armchair Archaeology, and turn on notifications so you won't miss what we uncover next. But more importantly, we want to hear from you. What part of this hidden history resonated with you? Which forgotten civilization should we explore in a future video? Leave your thoughts in the comments, share your questions, add to the conversation. And if you're still wondering how belief might have built civilization before bricks ever did, you'll find even more insights in our ebook, Secrets of the Ancient World. It's your passport to lost knowledge buried deep beneath time. Find the link in the pinned comment.
Until then, keep your curiosity sharp, your questions bold, and your imagination open. Because the past isn't finished. It's still speaking, and we're still listening.